just kind of a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today. I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview, or like, you know, of Print My Threads, talk a little bit about our story, our origin, our team, our culture. And then the purpose for me to here today was to try and inspire people. So we're going to talk a little bit about finding your life purpose, and then we'll go into like a Q&A after that. So get your questions ready. All right. Okay. So, all right. So they introduced me a little bit, but just to kind of recap, I met my wife. She's the co-founder. We met in Hawaii. This was after I had graduated high school. I did a short stint at the university. Well, I went to the United States Air Force Academy as a runner, thinking that I would graduate from there and get on their Olympic development team. Things didn't quite work out the way I wanted, so I left. I went back to the University of New Mexico, and then from there got a national student exchange to go to the University of Hawaii. I was in the fine arts program there, where I studied screen printing, met my wife, and then eventually followed her back to beautiful Eastern Kentucky. When we first came back from Hawaii, I told her that we would never live here. That was 22 years ago. Some business milestones. That's myself and my first employee, Corey, and my son, Finn, who's now 17, in a detached garage. That's where we started the business. We had a 1.5 car garage that we converted into a print studio. When I first started, I wanted to print like fine art and you know, have my own clothing line. So that's kind of how things started. Corey, who, in the red shirt there, almost burnt the shop down on his first day. So he no longer works for me. No, I'm just kidding. No, he took a position teaching. He's the art, I don't know if any of you guys know him, but he's the art teacher at Ashland Middle School now. So 2013, that's when we moved out of the garage and moved things to downtown Ashland. That was I think it's now a Boost Mobile. It used to be the Stump Hallmark. So then in 2013, we continued to expand. We found a building in Flatwoods, Kentucky. That's Jonathan, one of my other employees. He's pressure washing. That's the inside of the building. That's what it looked like when we bought it. The building had been vacant for 8 or 9 years, and it was originally a roller skating rink, but it had sat vacant. People had broken in, vandalized. There was water seeping into the building. The lights were all falling down. My wife told me I was crazy for buying it, but anyway, that's where we're currently at. It's a 9,000 square foot building. Moving into 2019 there, you can see that's us getting our first automatic press installed. So that picture there, we're breaking down the manual press that we used to print all of the shirts on manually. And then you can see kind of the upgrade to the automation. That's our first press there. We have 2 of those now. Then moving on to like 2020, again, we continued to renovate and fix the building. We ended up having to put a new roof on it. There was just water seeping into the building. And when we did that, we got a grant through the USDA to put solar panels. So we now offset about 85–90% of our electric usage with solar. 2020, we all know what happened in 2020. So when things kind of started to shut down, we pivoted into fundraising, and so there were a lot of businesses that had to shut down, lay their employees off, and so we did a fundraiser we have a kind of a side business called Print My Cause that we ran that through, and this was called Local Lifesaver, and the idea was you could buy a shirt and the proceeds would go to the business, like the local business of your choice. In 2021, that's a picture of us. We were invited to participate in the Invest 606 competition. It's a pitch competition, and we ended up winning that, so we won $15,000. 2022, this is just a picture of like some more automation. So what we do is called screen printing, which means we use a lot of screens to print with. And that there is basically like a big car wash for our screens, because we now cycle through so many screens that we have this piece of equipment we invested in. It used to take 2 guys all day long standing there with pressure washers and doing that process manually to to clean around 2 racks of screens. And with this machine there, we can go through a rack of screens in about 30, 45 minutes. And so my 2 sons actually come in now and they'll run that machine. It also saves water. It also recirculates all of our chemical, so it's better for the environment. It saves us money on chemical. It reduces our chemical usage. 2022, again, more of the kind of the give back. We were fortunate enough to be able to print a lot of shirts that went out to help the flood victims in Eastern Kentucky. I can't remember the exact amount of money that we raised, but it was substantial, partnering with some of the different clothing brands throughout the region. And then in 2023 and to present, that last picture there, that's a picture of a new digital printing process that we've invested in. It's called direct-to-film. It's a full-color digital technology that has recently kind of entered into the industry, and so we've already expanded there, and we have 2. I think we were like maybe one of the 6th shop in the country to get the Mamaki printer there, and we have 2 of those running now. So that's been kind of that area there used to be our showroom. And so I was telling Larry when I got here, we have this 9,000 square foot building. It used to have full department of graphic designers on site. We had a showroom and all this office space, and now we're using the entire building for production. So that's another picture kind of showing the progress. That's the building when we bought it, and then that's what it looks like today. My team, so we have a small team. At one point, I think we were up to 13 employees. We have 7. Casey, our graphic designer, works off-site. Bridget, who's actually my sister-in-law, who's our COO, she works off-site. And then the rest of the people are on-site team. But by investing in some of the technology that I showed you, we've basically been able to reduce the overall number of people that we employ, but then we can pay those people a lot better. So this slide kind of speaks a little bit to that. The whole kind of triple bottom line is something that we wanted to focus on from the very beginning. So people, profit, planet. You can see there we pay a living wage. The average hourly rate that we pay is $20 an hour. You can see what we've been able to do with the solar. To date, we've offset over $26,000 in electric usage, which is the equivalent of planting around 1,000 trees. And then our profit, we have a profit share, and so one of the things that we do for our employees is that we track the profitability of the company, and then at the end of the quarter, we pay out a profit share. So this really helps where we're like kind of high touch, high manufacturing. This really kind of motivates people to make sure that they're measuring twice, cutting once, that we don't have a lot of spoilage, that they're not milking the clock, that we're super efficient. So it sort of builds in a lot of ownership for our staff, because they know that the better we do and the more profitable the company is, that they're going to get paid out a part of that at the end of the quarter. So I'm going to kind of go where we got started a little late. I'm going to go kind of quickly through some of these, but as a business, to be sustainable and to grow and to scale, you have to really focus on a problem. And so like when we first started out, it was really a lot about just printing t-shirts. But then as things grew, we really had to kind of start looking at, well, what's that like bigger picture problem that we solve for our customers? And what we found is that the larger clients and the larger accounts that we have, it's much larger than just printing the t-shirts. And it typically involves some kind of logistics for them, or it helps them grow their cash flow or their revenue. One of the ways that we do that is we invested in a client portal. This is a custom-built tool that we did in terms of technology. On the slide back where I showed you that we won the Invest 606 pitch competition, what we pitched on and what we used the money for was to invest in the custom development of a customer portal. For our larger clients that have multiple orders going all at one time, this basically allows their team to log in. It's very similar, like if you go onto a Papa John's and you order a pizza and you can kind of see it's like we're making it, we're baking it, it's ready for pickup. Same kind of simple idea there, where they can log in, they can see the status of their orders. We're typically working with larger organizations that have one person's approving the order, another person's paying the invoice, another person's approving the artwork, and so this allows them to all come to one central place and do that, so that we can move things through the pipeline very quickly. This is kind of just a brief overview, shows sort of the markets that we serve. We're roughly about 70% in resale and promotional, and then 30% in fundraising. Very large, just like, as you know, like a big business in the area is healthcare, so that's a big chunk of the business that we do. And then kind of a few like customers that we can highlight. So Kentucky for Kentucky, if any of you have heard from them, they're a big brand out of Lexington. They used to have production in-house, and then they realized that, again, like their problem was, hey, look, we need to focus on growing sales, marketing, and we don't need to be messing with trying to do production in-house. They were really good on the product development, the marketing, the sales, and so they needed somebody that could come in and basically take over the production and help them save money and be more efficient there. The Ladies Edge is another large brand that we work with. They're an online fitness brand that really promotes women's health and fitness. They grew a ton during the pandemic when everybody was at home. They have like an online fitness program that they do. And they'd worked with several different screen printers before, and they were just having a really hard time finding people that could kind of keep color consistency, for their brand. And they do these monthly product launches where they'll like do a Facebook Live and they launch and they sell, and then they need the product right away. So just really quick turns. So we've been able to do that for them. Kingsdars is another example. One of the things that we've been able to build out for them when COVID hit, they have thousands of employees, and so it used to be this thing where they would get the T-shirts, and then the people would come and pick the T-shirts up like on their lunch break. When COVID hit, they didn't want to have that face-to-face interaction, so they needed a way logistically to get the shirts to people. So we basically now do individual order fulfillment for them. So we'll print 3,000 to 5,000 pieces. Those all get individually folded, bagged, and shipped directly to the employees. Rush Off Road is the last one that I'm going to talk about. So again, big business. They have these huge events. They needed a way that they could, kind of capitalize on that. So we do event T-shirts for them. We've also now expanded into promotional products. So we do some other different promo for them, magnetic koozies and some different things. So again, they just needed somebody that was able to, grow with them. When we first started, they were doing very little merch, and now they have like a C-store on site that's completely dedicated to that. So it's helped them grow their revenue and grow their business through that. All right, so any questions before I get into the next part? Nothing. Yeah?
I plan on being an electrical contractor, not only a contractor, but a wholesaler.
Okay.
As far as like the legal aspects, what all is involved with starting your own business?
So when it gets into the legalities, I guess my best piece of advice would be you're going to want to get with somebody like who's either I would say find an accountant or like a CFO or somebody that specializes in that that can help kind of guide you through how to structure your business. So when you first start out, a lot of people will just start as like an LLC. It's a very simple, easy, way to start. And then as you kind of grow, we're now like an S corp for tax purposes. So, but as things grow and scale, you're going to want to have someone help you through that. I know like the SBA can help a lot with that. So there's different community resources. I don't know if SOAR, might have a better answer for that then. But.
Best thing to do is grow your team, and sometimes your team means finding a good attorney or a CPA to kind of walk you through. They're the experts in that field, so definitely lean to make sure that they understand what your personal finances, what your business finances, to make sure that you're in the right tax affiliation and all of that. But yeah, definitely we can connect. We've got a complete guide for entrepreneurship that kind of walks through that. And then the Small Business Development Center is an excellent resource for that as well.
Yeah, one story like I can share is like my wife and I, we got to the point where we were trying to do all of our own bookkeeping and accounting, and I remember very specifically it was on a Saturday, and her parents were watching our kids, and we were trying to go in and clean up our books, and we spent hours on it just to realize that we had done everything wrong, and I'm pretty sure I punched a hole through a door, and and it was not pretty, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so glad the kids were not here to see that, and we decided that was time to hire an accountant, and then we've never looked back. So we actually up until just very recently, we were working with a fractional CFO who, was huge for us because, but basically when you get into it and you start bringing on employees and you start growing the business, one mistake in your accounting or finances is going to cost way more in, fees and than it is to pay the person to help you. So, yeah. Yeah, or audits, right. Knock on wood. No audits. All right, so getting into this next section, show of hands, who's heard of Ikigai? Okay, we got one person. All right, great. Well, so then hopefully you guys will get something out of this. So the first thing we want to talk about is how to pronounce it, right? So it's Ikigai, not Ikigai, right? I'm the icky guy, but the Ikigai is it's a Japanese term, right? And basically, Iki is for life, and then Gai is your value or worth. So sort of the westernized, I guess, definition would be, something that it's your reason for being, or, something that you're passionate about that brings joy into your life, okay? So there's 4 different elements to Ikigai. Basically, it's what you love or what you're passionate about, what you're good at, what the world needs, and then lastly, what you can be paid for, okay? And so this is sort of like a chart that is floating around. You can find this on the internet, but this is sort of the whole concept of Ikigai. It's very Japanese, it's very beautiful, and the way things overlap. But the kind of the underlying premise, right, is that if you can figure out what you love, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what you're good at, where all of those things convene in the very middle there, that is your Ikigai. So kind of like trying to figure out, so if you were one to sit down and say, hey, so like I want to figure out my Ikigai, right? So we're trying to get inspired today, figure out, what is it that I want to do with my life? What kind of business might I want to start? What do I want to do? What field do I want to go into when I graduate from school? You can basically sit down and you can take a piece of paper and put it into 4 quadrants like this. And you basically start with these 4 questions, right? So you look at what do you love? Right, so that could basically mean, what's something that where like you never get bored, or when you're doing it, you get into that kind of flow state where it seems like time sort of stands still. What are you good at, right? So is there something that like ever since you've been a little kid, something that you're really good at, something that comes very natural to you? What can I get paid for, right? So maybe some of you have had jobs, and there's something that you found that people are willing to pay you for. That's a really important one, right? Because if someone's not willing to pay you for it, then it's something that you can be really passionate about, but it's basically it can't become like your main job or occupation because it's not sustainable, right? And then the last one is sometimes I think people struggle with this one in terms of what does the world need. And so I think kind of a better way of looking at that one is more like, what does your world need? So instead of trying to look at it so big picture in terms of, something that's going to be earth shattering or, world changing, look at it in terms of like, who are the people in your life and in your community, and what are some of the gaps that you've identified or things that you see that people in your community could benefit from. So I did kind of just like a quick breakdown for myself, right? So if you look here, like what do I love? So I love working with my hands. I love helping others. I like creating and managing systems. Okay, what am I good at? So I learned how to screen print. I'm good at graphic design. I was a painter. I like, again, building things, and then also good at business. And then you move into what are people willing to pay us for? Well, so we know that we can sell them decorated apparel. I know that, managing people and systems. I mentioned kind of like the logistics, right? That we actually make probably just as much money now off of the logistics and the order fulfillment things that we do for people as we do for actually printing the apparel. And then when you get into like branding, marketing, those are all things that people have a need for and are willing to pay for. And then the last thing, what does the world need? Going back to some of those customer examples, right? Things like brand awareness, growing their revenue, having like a physical product to sell, And then also, the other thing that I haven't touched a whole lot on, but we see on the nonprofit side using decorated apparel as a way to like build unity and community and kind of like bringing people around the cause. Okay, so going back to the chart, you can kind of see how these things are going to overlap and bring us to our ikigai. And so, I've been doing this for 15 years now, and I think the thing that's interesting about ikigai is that it's not like something that you figure out once and then that's it. It's something that you're going to like constantly chase and go after. And so, recently I was actually kind of experiencing quite a bit of burnout. I got to the point where I could care less if I saw another shirt come off the press, right? And so I had to kind of do some soul searching and figure out, really thinking about my ikigai, my purpose, like what inspires me. And so if you remember back to that first picture where I was in my home-based studio and I had that press, and I started out wanting to have print my own art and have my own clothing line, and 15 years later here we are, and I've got all these people working for me and we've grown this business, but I'm just managing people and processes. I'm not actually even ever screen printing anymore. So I decided to do something about that. And so I went on a road trip. And if you see these guys here, this is Andy McDougall and his business partner, and they are they live in a little island off Vancouver, Canada called Comox. And he's like an OG screen printer that used to do fine art printing for all of the native Northwest Coast Indians. So you can kind of see like a print behind them. It's like a large 4x4 print. If any of you are familiar with the Northwest Coast Indians, they're real famous for like the totem poles and that type of artwork. So these guys worked with the native Indians from the area to do these massive, beautiful prints, and it really kind of helped, bring the people in the tribe out of poverty, and it helped them express themselves, and it was like a really cool project. So I have known Andy. He actually helped me get my home-based studio set up, and so he and I were talking, and I wanted to get back into like fine art printing. The problem is that because of the industry, everything has now gotten to the point where it's very automated, and so the presses that you use to do these really large fine art prints, they basically don't make them anymore. So there's some people in Europe that'll make them, but super expensive, really long lead times because it's basically like a custom build. And so Andy and I got to talking. He's like, hey, well, my business partner actually has one. It's been sitting in his home-based studio for like 15, 20 years, and he's not using it. So why don't you come out here and you can buy it, all right, and we'll help you load it up and you can take it back. So I flew out to Vancouver. I got on a seaplane right there. I actually got to sit co-pilot, which was pretty cool. That's the view from the plane, and that's me sitting outside Andy's house after I got to Comox. That's us there. We're in this guy's home-based studio, very similar to kind of like what I had when I first started, and that's his son, and the four of us. That press probably weighs over 2,000 pounds, and believe it or not, this guy right here, he's 80 years old, and the four of us managed to load that thing into the back of it. You can kind of see the U-Haul right there. So really the only way we could barely load this, barely back this 10-foot U-Haul back up to to this guy's studio, and we loaded this press up into the back of that U-Haul. I then had to drive it and put it on this ferry to get off the island. I think that's kind of a funny picture because that's the U-Haul that's on the ferry, right? So basically my midlife crisis is loaded right up in there, and then that's somebody else's midlife crisis right there. So, but yeah, so I got caught at like the border for 7.5 hours. Turns out you need a lot of paperwork to move equipment from Canada to the United States, which I did not know. So I got there and they would not let me across the border, so I had to hire a freight broker and hang out for 7.5 hours. Finally got across the border, drove the 42 hours back to Kentucky. This is my guys that are helping us. We're getting it off. It was actually a lot harder getting it off than it was to get on, but that's us getting the press off of the truck. That's us right after we got it inside the new studio space, and then that's it down and kind of put back together. So basically there's this big, huge master frame. The screens that I'll use to print on this are going to be like about 72 inches by 50 inches, so the massive screens. And so we'll be able to do some really cool, big, like fine art printing with it. But yeah, so that was sort of my ikigai or midlife crisis. I just wanted to kind of share the story because I think it's interesting. It's like, I think it's important to sit down and consider and think through, what brings passion or joy into my life, and my ikigai, but also kind of show that it's ever evolving, so it never really stops. And just trying to kind of inspire you to what, take the time, sit down, think what is it that brings joy and passion into my life, and then when you figure it out, sometimes you have to do crazy things. You have to pick up and fly to Canada. Anyway, so I hope you enjoy that, and I guess that's where I'll wrap, and hopefully you guys have some questions that I can help answer. We got to break the silence. Come on, cowbells. Yeah, that's it. That's Print My Threads. Yep. So this is a picture of every year we do the Chamber of Commerce. They just changed their name, Northeastern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, they have a youth leadership development program. So we'll have the kids come out and they get to tour the shop. And we used to have a manual press where they could print their own shirt. We actually don't even have a manual press anymore. Everything is automated. But they get to watch the process and they get a shirt when they're done with it. So yeah.
You could go back to when you first started your business. What advice would you give yourself?
Don't do it. No, I think, it's owning and growing your own business, I think, is one of the hardest things you can do. I give a lot of credit to my wife because she's kind of had to go through it, and it's very much like a roller coaster ride. And honestly, like without her, I don't know that we would have been able to do it, because she's the one she's had a very good paying job with insurance, and she's been able to provide that stability and support. Obviously we've been fortunate, and over the 15 years we've grown it to where now we have like a very sustainable, stable business in place, but it's not always like that. One of the things I would kind of recommend to anybody now that's looking to start a business is that right now there's this huge transition going on of baby boomers who are aging out of businesses. So a lot of times when I talk to like young people that think they want to start their own business or get into entrepreneurship, one of the things I say is like, well, figure out what you're passionate about or what you're interested in, and then once you do that, go and work for somebody that already has that business going. Don't just try and start a business right out the gate, because if you can find somebody who's already doing what you want to be doing, there's a really good chance that if you can go and work for them and you can kind of learn the business and kind of under their wing, they might want to sell it to you someday. There's a lot of people like myself who have kids who, if one of them decides that they want to continue the business, great, but like growing up, both my parents were teachers, and so the one thing I knew I didn't want to do was be a teacher. And I think a lot of times, like when you grow up in a family where your parent owns a business, like the one thing you don't want to do is be in the business. And so I think that if you're really looking at entrepreneurship, you don't need to recreate the wheel, and if nothing else, you're going to go and you're going to learn from someone who's been there, done that, and you're going to learn a lot from them. But you also might be able to work yourself into a situation where you quickly kind of go through the ranks, become their number two or whatever, and then there might be an opportunity there for them to transition or sell the business to you.
How much planning was there when y'all were first starting? Was it just kind of start doing something, or was it you have pages and pages?
Probably a mixture of both. I think there's planning. I think at the time I thought that I had planned everything out. What's the saying? It's like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I had been working when we first moved to Kentucky, I did a lot of work in the nonprofit world, and then as an AmeriCorps Vista, and then I started working for the University of Kentucky Extension Service. And this was back, I think, in like around 2009 2009 when, you know, things were kind of happening in the economy and funding was drying up. And so I actually got an opportunity to go work for the Social Security Administration. I always tell people it was like, if you've seen the show The Office, it was just like The Office except not funny, because you were the one I was the one like in the office, and I was just working with, I was there for a couple of weeks, and it was like, well, first of all, I got meningitis and they had to shut the place down because they were worried that I'd given it to everybody. But it turned into this thing where it was like everybody that worked there just hated their life. But the way that the federal government works is if you stay in a job long enough, you get like more salary, and so it was this thing where everybody stayed because they were just climbing that ladder, but nobody was, there was no ikigai in the building, right? Like nobody was passionate about what they were doing. So I remember I went to my wife and I just said, like, look, I can't do this and I need to get out now, because if I don't like it when I'm making, I think it was $34,000 a year, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna want to quit when I'm making $80,000 a year. And so she was actually pregnant with our second kid, and I decided to quit my job and start a screen printing business where I was going to like print children's books and organic apparel and like fine art. And her dad, I remember her dad sat down and just thought I was insane. So there wasn't, to answer your question, there wasn't a ton of planning. And I think the thing that's helped us over the years is that we've been able to sort of like be very nimble and like adaptable. So like we were able to figure out, so like we found out very quickly that like the money wasn't going to be made in me printing and like selling my own stuff. This was like sort of pre-internet e-commerce. So like all of that was just sort of, I don't even think Shopify had come out yet. You know, there weren't like these big e-commerce platforms. And so but we found out very quickly that where I had connections in local business and with these nonprofits, that they all needed t-shirts. And so we very quickly transitioned to printing t-shirts for other people. And then when we moved out of the garage and into the storefront, we weren't doing anything different from when I was in my garage, but we had that added visibility and that added like, it just validated it for everybody that we were like a legit company and a legit business. So then we saw like big growth there. And so, you know, it was a very organic thing, but we had to, you know, at one point we got into like very heavy into digital printing, and that was a nightmare. And so we're able to get out of that, and then, you know, constantly look at like where do we make our money and where do we add value for people, and then kind of just continue to put our focus there, which is good for growing a business. But going back to what I was saying, it can also, you got to make sure that the cat's not wagging, the tail's not wagging the cat. You make sure that you don't get so far off of like what your original purpose or passion was, that you get so far removed from that then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, I just don't want to do this anymore. So. These are good questions.
Did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or did you accidentally fall into it?
I mean, I sort of fell into it. Like I said, both my parents were teachers, horrible with money, not business savvy. My grandfather had a realty business that a lot of my aunt and uncles worked for, so that was sort of the closest thing that I grew up in terms of entrepreneurship. When I worked for the University of Kentucky Extension Service, my title was for Community and Economic Development. That's how I met Larry. And through that job, there was one of the professors at UK had this program that they were doing about entrepreneurship. So I was involved with that, and I got to travel around central Kentucky, and it was all about, you know, fostering entrepreneurship and how to like grow rural communities through local entrepreneurship. And so I think that was sort of when I started having that, like, it sort of planted that seed. I started having that kind of aha, like, hey, I could work for myself. I think the other thing for me is that I knew from very early on, like, I always wanted to make money, like making things with my hands, creating art, you know, doing something creative. I don't sit still, and I can't be in an office type environment. And there weren't a lot of options around here for that, and so I think it finally just came to a head where it's like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to create it for myself. So, anybody else?
How did you feel when you kind of like jumped ship straight off into just hitting the ground running off of your first job that you quit?
When I quit the Social Security Administration, I mean, I felt great. I mean, you know, it's scary, but I guess, I don't know, the way I operate is that, and what I tell people is that, like, I'm a firm believer that if you're going to do something, you really have to like put it out in the universe, and if you don't like jump all in, like, it's never really it's not going to happen, right? And so it's like, it's that way with relationships. It's that way with business. It's just like if you're really passionate about something, if you don't go all in and you give yourself like a safety net that you can, then you're always gonna fall back into what you were before. So I know like my experience growing up, it's always been if there's ever anything that like some kind of big, hairy, audacious goal or something that I want to do, I have to like fully commit and go all in and make sure that I don't really leave myself like an out. And that's typically like when big things happen. So and maybe that's careless, but I don't know, it's worked for me so far. So.
You said you had a safety net. Did you own your house and have like savings and stuff?
No, we didn't. I mean, if any kind of safety net, it was my wife, right? So she had a good paying job. I mean, we were in a house that we had a mortgage for, so we had debt. But I think a lot of it was, when you're starting, I think that's the other thing too that people talk on this. It's like when people start a business, they want to focus on all of like the cool stuff. It's like, oh, the name and the logo and the where's my space going to be, and again, going back to why I'm saying like you really go work for somebody and figure it out and see, because you're going to end up spending. You can't go right out the gate just spending a ton of money on stuff. I mean, it was very like right now. I mean, we have a very state-of-the-art facility. We pay our people really well, but like that was over 15 years, right? Like when we started, it was like very bootstrapped. It was like I remember. I think when we hired our first employee, I was so nervous because I didn't know if I could pay him $8 an hour. And so, it's like, it's a lot of work. And that's going back to like when I said, like, don't do it. Like, what would I say? Tell myself, like, don't do it. Like, looking back, like when I create presentations like this and I go back through all of my pictures, it's exhausting. like I go back and I look at like kind of what we had to go through to get to where we are now. And like, I personally don't have the energy at 44 to like think about doing it again. So it's a lot.
My question was, how or when did you think or know that you, I guess, made it as an entrepreneur? Like what time during this transition or this whole period did you kind of, hey, I'm doing it, I'm actually doing it?
Yeah, I don't know that there's really any like one significant moment. I mean, I don't know that I probably don't do a very good job of like thinking about like the wins or the successes, you know what I mean? Like, cause I'm just too busy to kind of keep my head down and just constantly trying to move forward. I will say that like, I think one of the things that I get, so I'm not really motivated by money. I mean, it's nice to have it, I like to make it, but that's not really what drives me. So I think for me, like what kind of gets me out of bed, again, going back to the purpose and the ikigai, is that one of the things that I've enjoyed seeing over the years is like when one of my staff like buys a new car, or like one of my guys, he's on vacation this week because he just got married and he was able to take a week off paid vacation to go on his honeymoon. Or when they're, putting a down, when they're mortgaging a house. Like that's, to me, like like being able to pay that living wage and create that job, obviously it's not like our bread and butter and where we make our money, but anytime that we get to participate in the projects where we're, helping the flood victims, or, when we were able to help out during COVID, those types of things are like really more what I'm passionate about. And, it's tricky because as a business, you have to make sure that you're covering your overhead and paying your bills. And as things grow, that only becomes more and more a part of it. But so I think it's a balance, and I think so. I don't know if there's any one thing where like I made it, but I feel like we've definitely hit a sweet spot. And so now we're just kind of like we're at a point where I think there's a point in business where, unless we want to double down and we want to take on a bunch more debt and really try and expand, you get to a point where it's more about like how do you maintain, and it comes more about like, so that includes like taking better care of your people to make sure that they stick around, and make like, yeah, so.
How would you say that you kept people around at the very beginning when you were having trouble paying people?
We didn't. I mean, we had a lot of turnover early on, like Corey, I mean, he got I hired him and I paid him what I could pay him. And then as soon as he got offered a job at teaching at the middle school, I mean, there's no way I could compete with that, right? I mean, he's moving into a salary paid position with benefits. And so, early on we had a ton of turnover, and it was difficult because you're constantly bringing in new people, and then you have to spend a bunch, it's very expensive to train people, and you would get them and they would start to learn and get really like into a mode and learn and know their job, and then they would leave for something different. So I mean, it's just that, again, it's like we have like a really good small like core group of people who are very dedicated, and so like that's why I try and emphasize and put so much focus on that now, because again, it's like I'm sort of at a point in the business and where it's like I don't want to be spending a ton of time like bringing on new people and trying to train them, and it's tricky because we got to make sure that we balance that with it, bringing in fresh people and blood and energy to where we're not all these old guys that are like, oh my god, like trying to what we do is like very labor intensive, and I was like one of our press operators, and then I had back surgery last year, and I don't run a press anymore. It's like, even though we have a lot of equipment that's automated and it kind of like takes a lot of the labor out of it, it's still, you're on your feet all day, and it's wear and tear on your body for sure. So
processes and operations can be sneaky in business. How did you get ahead of that as a business owner and as you brought on more team?
So at one point we were like contract printing for this guy out of California. When we first started, we were all water-based ink. So we got really well known for like eco-friendly screen printing. We were working with a lot of like environmental nonprofits and people out of like California. And we were working with this one company, and he was just like a sales engine. So he was just sending us accounts and work, and I remember he and I were kind of butting heads because of the different stuff that his expectations or whatever. And he sent me this book. I think it was called Work the System, and I think it's Sam Carpenter. But I remember very vividly like reading that book, and it was kind of like a light went off, like about just the importance of building out good systems. And then that I've just kind of become like, I don't ever read, it's funny, like my degree was actually in like creative writing and studio art, but like I never read fiction, I always read nonfiction. So like I just really like reading about like systems management, process management, because again, like over the years, that's what's like at one point I think I mentioned we had like 13 people, but we're doing probably double the output that we were with 13 people with the 7. So, some of that's, investing in equipment and automation, but a lot of that's just like building out really good systems, whether that be the technology. But like for us, I mean, everything is so systemized now, and that's really like my role in the company now is like anytime that we bring on a new, like when we bring on the digital printing, like I have to get in the weeds and like figure that out and build systems around it and make it as efficient as possible. And then I pass it off to like, someone that can then do that. But yeah, I think systems is huge. Oops. The other thing that another good thing to look at is the 80-20 rule. If anybody's ever looked at that, but like when COVID hit, I mean, that was another big, I think, turning point for us. We got to the point where our business was like, we were growing revenue like this, but our overhead was going like this. So everybody was working, really, really hard, but at the end of the day, we weren't making any more money. And so we had to get really intentional about looking at the 80-20. So the whole idea behind the 80-20 principle is that 20% of your effort or output, or 20% of what you do results in 80% of what you're going to bring in. And it can be applied to like so many different circumstances, but the kind of what we did is we started looking at our customer list, and we said, okay, so like who are we making our money with? What are the what are those niches that we can find? And for us, that was really healthcare. And so we started cutting out like the bottom, you can pretty much start cutting out the bottom 80% of your customers and focus on those 20, and you end up doing a lot less work, but you make just as much money. And then what happens is when you start cutting out that 80% of the work that you're not really making any money on, it's just like busy work, it frees open that time, like it opens up all this additional time that you can then use to go and find more people who match that demographic or the in that 20%. And so when we did that again, that was like huge for us. We actually saw like a dip in revenue initially, but our profitability went went way up. And so again, it's figuring out, again, like, what are we really good at? Who should we be doing business with? I think, and that's something, again, that it takes time, because when you first start a business, it's just like, anybody that wants t-shirts, we're gonna print them, But then as you kind of grow and you scale, you start to learn, like, we can print this over here, but you can, in our industry especially, you see businesses that if they stop to take a look at it, they're actually paying the customer to print for them. And that's what'll put you under. I feel like I've talked for a really long time. All right, well, thank you so much again for having me.